My girlfriend Sarah and I embarked on a road trip with no destination in mind. We were both in our mid-20s, restless souls seeking adventure. I was a freelance writer, and Sarah was an artist. We loved the open road, the sense of freedom it gave us. On this particular trip, we found ourselves somewhere in Nebraska, one of those states that seems to be about 90% cornfields. We had been driving for almost 2 days straight, switching back and forth, barely stopping to rest. It was late when we decided to stop for the night at a little podunk motel we stumbled upon. It had only 5 or 6 rooms, and the place looked like it had seen better days. The wooden sign creaked in the wind, and the paint was peeling off the walls. I could feel the weariness in my bones as I parked the car. Sarah stretched and yawned, her auburn hair glowing in the dim light of the motel's lone street lamp. "I'll check us in," she said, heading towards the reception room. I lingered outside, taking in the sketchy, fall-down place. My unease grew as I noticed the state of disrepair. When Sarah called out for me to join her, I saw why. Inside the reception room stood a man who was, to put it mildly, enormous. I'm no slouch in the big guy department myself, standing at 6 feet 2 inches and weighing about 220 pounds. But this guy towered over me by at least 10 or 12 inches, making him close to 7 feet tall, and he had at least 100 pounds on me. He looked like he had been extruded from some sort of tree, solid, unmoving, with a face carved out of stone. We walked in and asked for a room. The man smiled, a disconcerting expression that didn't reach his eyes. He nodded, wrote something on the desk, took my cash, and handed us a key. Behind him, I noticed several TVs on the desk, like stereotypical CCTV displays from the 80s. As I looked down, one screen caught my eye. It was showing pornographic material. My heart skipped a beat. The man was wearing jogging pants, and it was clear he had an erection. I quickly took the key and ushered Sarah outside. She was too short to see over the desk and hadn't noticed the porn. "Let's get to our room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's wrong?" she asked, sensing my tension. "Nothing. Let's just get some rest." The room was small and dingy, with a musty smell that reminded me of wet dogs. I locked the door and placed our large suitcases against it. Then, I put a vase on the suitcases so that if the door opened, the vase would fall and wake us. I also rigged the windows with some plastic cups to act as makeshift alarms. Sarah and I both showered, the hot water washing away the grime of the road, but not the feeling of unease. We conked out on the bed around 11:45 p.m. The mattress was lumpy, and the sheets were scratchy, but exhaustion won over discomfort. I remember holding Sarah close, her warmth a comfort in the unsettling surroundings. At around 3:30 a.m., I woke up feeling disoriented. There was a weird sensation in the pit of my stomach, an instinct telling me something was wrong. I decided to go grab a drink and get some ice from the foyer. As I stepped out of the room, the chill of the night air hit me. The man wasn't around, and the reception area was empty. My curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the CCTVs on the desk. The same porn was still playing on one screen. Another screen showed surveillance footage from the parking lot. But what made my blood run cold was the third screen. It was showing the inside of our room. Sarah was fast asleep on the bed, oblivious to the camera watching her. I felt a surge of panic. Someone had been watching us sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. I hurried back to the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly packed our bags, trying not to make too much noise. Sarah stirred as I picked her up and carried her to the car. "What's happening?" she mumbled, still half asleep. "We need to leave." "Now," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't ask any more questions, trusting me completely. We got into the car, and I drove away from that hellhole as fast as I could. The miles flew by as the adrenaline surged through my veins, keeping me awake and alert. As the sun began to rise, the reality of what had happened started to sink in. The man at the desk, his eerie silence, the weird porn that seemed almost non-sexual yet deeply disturbing, the surveillance camera in our room, it all pointed to something sinister. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if we had stayed longer. Sarah and I didn't talk much about that night in the days that followed. We continued our road trip, but there was a lingering tension between us. The experience had shaken us both, and it took a while for us to feel safe again. Looking back, there are a few things that still give me the creeps. The giant man, his unnerving smile, and the way he never spoke a word. The bizarre porn, with its underage-looking girls in a gymnasium, acting like robots. And most of all, the realization that someone had been watching us sleep. It's a memory that has stuck with me all these years, a reminder of how vulnerable we can be, even when we think we're just taking a break from the road.
Traveling for work had become second nature to me. As a senior marketing executive for a large pharmaceutical company, I often found myself on flights to various conferences and meetings. This time, I was headed to a major medical convention in Chicago, a trip I had been both looking forward to and dreading due to its grueling schedule. After rushing through the airport and barely making my flight, I was relieved to find my seat and settle in for the journey. The man seated next to me seemed pleasant enough at first glance. He was in his mid-40s, neatly dressed in a business suit, and had an air of confidence about him. As the plane took off, he struck up a conversation. Initially, it seemed like harmless small talk, where I was from, what I did for a living. His name was Richard, and he claimed to be in the tech industry, attending the same conference. However, as the conversation progressed, Richard's demeanor began to unsettle me. He asked probing questions about my personal life, if I was married, had kids, where I lived. I tried to steer the conversation back to work topics, but he was persistent. He leaned in too close, his cologne overwhelming, and his eyes lingered on me a bit too long. I felt a prickle of unease but brushed it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. Eventually, the flight landed, and we parted ways. As we exchanged business cards, he made a comment about hoping to see me again at the convention. I forced a polite smile and hurried off the plane, eager to get to my hotel and relax. That evening, after a long day of meetings, I finally had a moment to unwind in my hotel room. I ordered room service and flipped through the TV channels, enjoying the solitude. My phone rang, and I answered, thinking it might be a colleague. "Hello, this is the front desk. Your husband is here and would like to come up. Can we give him a key to your room?" My heart skipped a beat. "My husband," I replied, confusion quickly turning to alarm. "I think you must have the wrong room. My husband isn't here." The receptionist paused, then said, "He said he is supposed to meet you here today." "Mr. Richard?" A chill ran down my spine. I could still picture his unsettling smile, his too personal questions. "No, he's not my husband. Please do not give him a key," I said firmly. "I understand. We'll take care of it," the receptionist assured me. I hung up, my hands shaking. I quickly locked and bolted the door, double-checking the chain. My mind raced with the implications. Richard had not only remembered which hotel I was staying at, but had the audacity to pretend to be my husband to gain access to my room. I felt violated, the privacy of my personal space shattered. The rest of the evening was a blur. I reported the incident to hotel security and made sure they knew not to let Richard anywhere near me. The next day, I was hyper-aware of my surroundings at the convention, scanning the crowd for any sign of him. The experience left a lasting impact on me. I became more cautious, more guarded during my travels. It was a stark reminder that even a casual conversation could take a sinister turn, and that vigilance was essential, even in the most mundane interactions.
After wrapping up a grueling 5-day work event where I managed to snag a grand total of 10 hours of sleep, I was off on a business trip to a new country. The event had been a huge success, a product launch that had every bit of my energy and dedication poured into it. As the marketing director for a burgeoning tech firm, It was my responsibility to ensure that every detail was perfect. When it finally ended, the adrenaline crash was brutal. I landed late in the evening, exhausted to the core. My company had booked me into a small motel for the night, as the flight connections to my final destination, a tech conference in the heart of the city, weren't available until the next day. The moment I stepped into the motel, I could tell it was far from luxurious. The carpets had a dampness that seeped into the air, and the blankets felt clammy to the touch. I was too tired to care. I dropped my suitcase, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the bed, not bothering to change out of my clothes. The last thing I remember was checking the time. 8 p.m. local time. I was out like a light almost instantly. The room was dark and quiet, a welcome change from the bustling conference center I had just left. However, my peace was short-lived. Around 11 p.m., the phone rang shrilly, jarring me out of a deep sleep. Groggy and disoriented, I picked up. The voice on the other end, a man claiming to be from the motel staff, informed me there had been a noise complaint. Still half asleep, I told him it was impossible. I had been asleep since I got in. He asked if there was anyone else in the room. Annoyed and confused, I reiterated that I was alone. The caller seemed insistent, almost anxious as he questioned me again. "Are you sure you're alone? You're not causing any noise?" Frustrated, I confirmed once more before hanging up. The moment I put the phone down, I was asleep again. It wasn't until morning, as sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, that the strangeness of the call hit me. The motel had been eerily silent. I hadn't heard a peep from any other guests. I decided to inquire at the front desk during checkout. The receptionist, a young woman with a weary smile, looked puzzled when I mentioned the call. She assured me that no one from the staff had made any noise complaints the previous night. A chill ran down my spine as the pieces fell into place. Someone had been calling the rooms, trying to figure out who was alone and who wasn't. It dawned on me how close I might have come to real danger. The damp blankets and stained carpet suddenly felt trivial in comparison. As I left the motel, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I was grateful I always used the extra latch chain lock on motel doors, a habit born out of too many nights in questionable accommodations during my career. That little precaution might have been what kept me safe that night.